Chapter 1. The Invitation to Blackreef Island. Hercule Poirot adjusted his impeccable moustache, his gloved fingers brushing the waxed tips with practiced precision. The sea air, sharp with salt and the promise of a storm, tugged at his neatly tailored coat as he stood on the deck of the small steamer chugging toward Blackreef Island. The horizon was a watercolor smear of grey and blue, and the island itself loomed ahead, a jagged silhouette of cliffs and secrets. Poirot's grey eyes, keen as a falcon's, scanned the distant shore. He had received many invitations in his illustrious career, but few had piqued his curiosity as much as the one now tucked in his breast pocket. The letter, penned in elegant calligraphy, had arrived at his London flat 3 days prior. It bore the seal of Lord Reginald Hawthorne, a name Poirot recognized from the society pages, a financier of dubious repute, known for his wealth and penchant for theatrics. The invitation requested Poirot's presence at a grand retreat on Blackreef Island, promising fine company, exquisite cuisine, and a matter of utmost discretion. No further details were provided, which to Poirot was as enticing as a locked room. He had accepted, not out of idleness, but because his little grey cells sensed a puzzle brewing. As the steamer docked at the island's modest pier, Poirot noted the absence of a welcoming party. A single groundskeeper, a wiry man with wind-burned cheeks, directed him to a horse-drawn carriage, waiting to ascend the winding path to Hawthorne Manor. The journey was silent save for the clatter of hooves and the distant cry of gulls. The island was a study in contrasts. Lush greenery clung to its edges, but the cliffs were stark and forbidding, as if guarding secrets from the sea. Poirot's mind catalogued every detail: the scent of pine, the rustle of leaves, the faint hum of unease in the air. Hawthorne Manor emerged from the mist like a Gothic painting. Its turrets pierced the sky, and ivy crawled over its stone facade, giving it an air of both grandeur and decay. Poirot stepped from the carriage, his polished shoes clicking on the cobblestone path. A butler, stiff as a marionette, greeted him at the entrance. "Monsieur Poirot," he intoned, "Lord Hawthorne awaits you in the drawing-room." The drawing-room was a spectacle of opulence: crystal chandeliers, velvet drapes, and a roaring fireplace that cast flickering shadows on the walls. Lord Reginald Hawthorne stood at the centre, a tall man with silver hair and a smile that did not reach his eyes. "Monsieur Poirot," he boomed, extending a hand, "your reputation precedes you. I trust the journey was pleasant." "Most satisfactory," Poirot replied. His voice clipped and precise. He studied Hawthorne, his tailored suit, his restless fingers, the faint strain in his posture. A man with something to hide, perhaps. Poirot's gaze shifted to the other guests, who were scattered about the room like pieces on a chessboard. There was Lady Eleanor Vance, a widow draped in black silk, her sharp eyes betraying a mind as calculating as Poirot's own. Beside her stood Dr. Julian Carver, a neurologist with a nervous tic and a habit of adjusting his spectacles. Miss Clara Beaumont, a young actress with golden curls and a laugh that rang too loudly, sipped champagne with theatrical flair. Captain Roger Maitland, a retired naval officer, leaned against the mantel, his weathered face betraying a life of hardship. Lastly, Mr. Vincent Lyle, a stockbroker with slicked-back hair and a predatory grin, hovered near the bar, watching the others with unsettling intensity. Poirot committed their faces to memory, noting their postures, their glances, their unspoken tensions. "A most eclectic gathering," he remarked to Hawthorne, his tone light but probing. "Indeed," Hawthorne replied, his smile tightening. "I've invited you all for a purpose, though I shall reveal it in due time. For now, enjoy the hospitality of Blackreef Island." His words were warm, but Poirot detected a note of calculation, as if each guest had been chosen for a role in an unseen drama. The evening unfolded with a lavish dinner in the dining hall, where candlelight danced on silverware and the aroma of roasted pheasant filled the air. Poirot sat opposite Lady Vance, who spoke of her late husband's art collection with a bitterness that intrigued him. Carver, to his left, rambled about neurological disorders, his hands trembling slightly. Miss Beaumont regaled the table with tales of her stage triumphs, while Captain Maitland remained silent, his eyes fixed on Hawthorne. Lyle, meanwhile, made pointed remarks about financial markets, each comment laced with a barb aimed at their host. As the meal progressed, Poirot's little grey cells worked tirelessly. He noted the way Lady Vance's fingers tightened around her wine-glass when Hawthorne mentioned a recent business venture. He observed Dr. Carver's fleeting glance at Miss Beaumont, a look that held more than professional interest. He saw Captain Maitland's jaw clench when Lyle boasted of his latest deal. Small details, perhaps, but to Poirot they were threads in a tapestry yet to be woven. After dinner, the guests retired to the drawing-room for brandy and cigars. Poirot declined both, preferring to sip a Tessar New. Ain and observed the group from a corner. As the clock struck 11, a sudden gust of wind rattled the manor's windows, and the lights flickered briefly. Hawthorne stood to make a toast, his glass raised high. "To secrets unveiled and truths revealed," he said cryptically, his eyes sweeping over the guests. Poirot's moustache twitched. Secrets indeed. As the guests dispersed to their rooms, Poirot lingered in the hallway, his mind abuzz. He reached into his pocket, intending to review Hawthorne's invitation once more, only to find a second note slipped there unnoticed. Its message was scrawled in hasty ink. "Beware the shadows on the shore. Not all is as it seems." Poirot's eyes narrowed. The game, it seemed, had already begun. He retired to his room, the note burning in his pocket like a coal. Blackreef Island was no mere retreat. It was a stage, and Poirot was determined to uncover the script before the curtain fell. Chapter 2. Shadows on the Shore. Hercule Poirot stood by the window of his guest room in Hawthorne Manor, the velvet curtains parted to reveal the restless sea beyond. The night was thick with the scent of salt and impending rain, and the distant rumble of waves against Blackreef Island's cliffs was a constant reminder of their isolation. The cryptic note he had found in his pocket, "Beware the shadows on the shore. Not all is as it seems," lay on the mahogany writing desk, its words taunting his little grey cells. Poirot's moustache twitched as he considered its implications. A warning, a threat, or merely a jest? He suspected the truth lay somewhere in between, and he was determined to find it. Sleep, for Poirot, was a luxury rarely indulged when a puzzle beckoned. Instead, he donned his overcoat, adjusted his hat, and slipped quietly from his room, the note tucked securely in his pocket. The manor was silent, its corridors dimly lit by flickering gas lamps that cast long shadows on the polished wood floors. Poirot's polished shoes made no sound as he descended the grand staircase, his senses alert to every creak and whisper of the old house. The other guests, he presumed, were asleep, but he trusted no one's claims at face value, not yet. Outside, the air was cool and damp, the moon obscured by heavy clouds. Poirot followed the gravel path that wound from the manor to the island's rocky shore, his walking stick tapping rhythmically against the stones. The note's mention of shadows on the shore had stirred his curiosity, and he intended to investigate the coastline himself. If Blackreef Island held secrets, they might well be hidden where the land met the sea. The path descended steeply, flanked by gnarled pines that swayed in the wind. As Poirot reached the shore, the rhythmic crash of waves grew louder, and the scent of seaweed filled his nostrils. The beach was a narrow strip of pebbles and driftwood, bordered by towering cliffs that seemed to guard the island's heart. He paused, his sharp eyes scanning the darkness. The note had been specific: shadows on the shore, and Poirot was not one to dismiss such clues as mere metaphor. A faint movement caught his attention, a silhouette fleeting and indistinct near the base of the cliffs. Poirot's grip tightened on his walking stick. He moved closer, his steps deliberate, avoiding the loose pebbles that might betray his presence. The figure was gone by the time he reached the spot, but the ground bore signs of disturbance: scuffed earth, a partial footprint in the damp sand. Poirot crouched, his gloved fingers tracing the outline. The print was small, perhaps a woman's, though the wind was already eroding its edges. He straightened, his mind cataloguing the detail for later scrutiny. As he continued along the shore, a faint glow flickered from a crevice in the cliff face, barely visible through a tangle of seaweed. Poirot approached cautiously, parting the slimy strands to reveal a narrow cave opening. The glow came from within, a lantern perhaps, left by someone in haste. He hesitated, aware that entering alone was unwise, yet his curiosity was a relentless taskmaster. With a glance over his shoulder to ensure he was unobserved, Poirot stepped into the cave. The interior was damp and cramped, the air heavy with the tang of salt. The lantern, an old oil model, sat on a ledge, its flame casting eerie shadows on the rough walls. Beside it lay a small bundle wrapped in oilcloth. Poirot unwrapped it carefully, revealing a tarnished silver locket engraved with the initials. EHA inside was a faded photograph of a young woman, her face strikingly familiar. Poirot's memory stirred. Had he seen her likeness in the manor, perhaps among the portraits in the drawing-room? He pocketed the locket, intending to investigate further. As he emerged from the cave, a sudden gust of wind extinguished the lantern, plunging him into darkness. A faint sound, a rustle, a footfall, came from the direction of the path. Poirot froze, his senses straining. "Who is there?" he called, his voice steady but commanding. No answer came, only the relentless crash of waves. He waited, his eyes adjusting to the dim light, but the shore appeared deserted. Yet Poirot was certain he had not been alone. Returning to the manor, he took a circuitous route, pausing occasionally to listen for pursuers. The house was as he had left it, silent save for the creak of settling timbers. In his room, he examined the locket under the light of a candle. The initials E.H. could belong to Lord Hawthorne himself. Edward Reginald Hawthorne, if Poirot recalled correctly, or perhaps another. The photograph, though faded, bore a resemblance to Lady Eleanor Vance, though younger and softer in expression. A coincidence? Poirot did not believe in such things. The next morning, breakfast was served in the dining hall, a grand affair of silver platters and steaming coffee. The guests gathered, their faces a mix of forced cheer and veiled suspicion. Lady Vance, elegant in a dove-grey gown, sipped her tea with studied calm, but Poirot noted the faint tremor in her hand. Dr. Carver was subdued, his eyes darting to the windows as if expecting an intruder. Miss Beaumont, ever the actress, chattered brightly about the island's beauty, though her laughter rang hollow. Captain Maitland ate in silence, his gaze fixed on his plate, while Mr. Lyle made pointed remarks about the stock market, each comment laced with an edge that set Poirot's nerves on alert. Lord Hawthorne presided over the meal with his usual charisma, but Poirot detected a strain in his demeanor, a glance too long at Lady Vance, a forced chuckle at Lyle's jests. "I trust you all slept well?" Hawthorne asked, his eyes sweeping the table. Poirot murmured a polite reply, his mind still on the locket and the shadow on the shore. He resolved to observe the guests closely, for one among them, or perhaps more, knew more than they revealed. After breakfast, Poirot sought out the manor's library, hoping to find the portrait that matched the locket's photograph. The room was a treasure trove of leather-bound volumes and faded tapestries, but the walls held no such portrait. Instead, he found a ledger tucked behind a row of books, its pages filled with cryptic entries, dates, initials, and sums of money. One entry caught his eye, E.H. 10,000, 1915. A debt, a payment, or something more sinister. As he closed the ledger, a floorboard creaked behind him. Poirot turned, but the room was empty. Yet the air felt charged, as if the manor itself were watching. He slipped the ledger back into place, his mind racing. The shadows on the shore were not merely figures in the night. They were the first threads of a tapestry of deception, and Poirot was determined to unravel it before it ensnared them all. Chapter 3. The Storm Sept's Arrival. The morning sky over Blackreef Island had turned a bruised shade of purple, the clouds heavy with the promise of a tempest. Hercule Poirot stood on the terrace of Hawthorne Manor, his gloved hands clasped behind his back, his eyes fixed on the horizon where the sea churned restlessly. The air was thick with moisture, and the wind carried a chill that seeped through his meticulously tailored coat. The cryptic note, the locket with the initials E.H., and the ledger's mysterious entries weighed heavily on his mind. His little grey cells buzzed with anticipation, for he sensed that the storm gathering above was but a prelude to a greater upheaval. Inside the manor, the guests had gathered in the dining hall for a late breakfast, their voices subdued under the oppressive weight of the weather. Poirot joined them, taking his seat with a polite nod to Lady Eleanor Vance, whose pale face betrayed a sleepless night. Julian Carver fidgeted with his napkin, his nervous tic more pronounced, while Miss Clara Beaumont's usual vivacity seemed forced, her laughter brittle. Captain Roger Maitland sat ramrod straight, his naval discipline evident in his rigid posture, and Mr. Vincent Lyle's sharp eyes darted from face to face, as if tallying their weaknesses. Lord Hawthorne, at the head of the table, exuded his usual charm, but Poirot noted a flicker of unease in his host's smile. "The weather, it seems, has plans of its own," Hawthorne remarked, gesturing toward the windows where rain had begun to lash the glass. "The steamer will not return until the storm passes. We are, for the moment, delightfully marooned." His tone was light, but Poirot detected a calculated edge, as if their isolation was no mere accident. Lady Vance set down her teacup with a clink. "Marooned?" she repeated, her voice sharp. "Surely, Lord Hawthorne, you have made arrangements." Hawthorne's smile widened, but it did not reach his eyes. "Fear not, Lady Vance. The manor is well stocked, and we are safe within these walls. Besides, I have planned an entertainment to keep us occupied. A game, if you will." Poirot's moustache twitched. A game. His instincts told him this was no ordinary diversion. He leaned forward slightly, his gaze fixed on Hawthorne. "And what, monsieur, is the nature of this game?" Hawthorne's eyes gleamed with mischief. "A test of truth," he said cryptically. "Tonight, at dinner, each of you will share a secret, a truth you've kept hidden. It will be illuminating." The words hung in the air, and the guests exchanged uneasy glances. Miss Beaumont laughed nervously, while Dr. Carver's spectacles slipped down his nose. Captain Maitland's jaw tightened, and Mr. Lyle's grin took on a predatory edge. Poirot's mind raced. A game of secrets on an isolated island, with a group of strangers harboring unspoken tensions. It was a recipe for chaos, and he suspected Hawthorne knew it. He resolved to watch the guests closely, for their reactions to this announcement were as telling as any confession. As the day progressed, the storm intensified, the wind howling through the manor's chimneys like a chorus of restless spirits. Poirot spent the afternoon in the library, poring over the ledger he had found the previous day. The entries were maddeningly vague, initials, dates, sums of money, but one caught his eye: 10,000, 1915, repaid in kind. The phrase "repaid in kind" intrigued him. A debt settled not with money but with something else, perhaps loyalty or silence. He tucked the ledger away, aware that its secrets were tied to the locket and the shadow he had glimpsed on the shore. The guests, confined by the storm, grew restless. Poirot observed them in the drawing-room, where Miss Beaumont attempted to lighten the mood with a dramatic reading from a novel. Her performance was met with polite applause, but Poirot noted the way Dr. Carver's eyes lingered on her, a mix of admiration and something darker. Lady Vance sat apart, her embroidery untouched, her gaze distant. Captain Maitland paced near the windows, as if longing to escape, while Mr. Lyle engaged Hawthorne in a heated discussion about investments, their voices low but intense. Dinner that evening was a lavish affair, the table adorned with crystal and silver despite the storm's ferocity. The candles flickered as gusts rattled the windows, casting shadows that danced across the guests' faces. Hawthorne rose, glass in hand, to address the group. "Tonight," he declared, "we play our game. Each of you will share a secret, a truth that defines you. I shall begin." He paused, his eyes sweeping the table. 20 years ago I made a decision that ruined a man's life. I have never spoken of it until now." The silence that followed was electric. Poirot watched the guests' reactions. Lady Vance's lips tightened. Dr. Carver's hands trembled. Miss Beaumont's smile faltered. Captain Maitland's eyes narrowed, and Mr. Lyle leaned forward, his interest piqued. Poirot's mind catalogued each response, sensing that Hawthorne's confession was a catalyst, designed to provoke. Lady Vance spoke next, her voice cold. "My husband's death was no accident," she said, her words cutting through the room. "I ensured he would not suffer needlessly. The admission hung heavy, and Poirot noted Dr. Carver's sharp intake of breath. Was it shock or recognition? Dr. Carver followed, his voice unsteady. I once falsified a patient's records to protect a colleague. His confession was vague, but his guilt was palpable. Miss Beaumont admitted to sabotaging a rival actress's career, her tone defiant. Captain Maitland spoke of a mutiny he had suppressed with excessive force, his voice flat. Mr. Lyle, with a smirk, confessed to manipulating stock prices for personal gain. Poirot listened, his little grey cells working furiously. Each secret revealed a motive, a fracture in the guests' facades. He declined to share a secret himself, citing his role as an observer, but his refusal drew sharp glances from Lyle and Hawthorne. The game ended abruptly when a clap of thunder shook the manor, and the lights flickered out, plunging the room into darkness. When the candles were relit, Hawthorne was still at the head of the table, but his face was pale, his hand clutching his glass tightly. "The storm grows fierce," he said, his voice strained. "Let us retire for the night." The guests dispersed, their secrets lingering like smoke in the air. Poirot lingered in the dining hall, his eyes on the empty chair where Hawthorne had sat. A scrap of paper, half hidden beneath a napkin, caught his attention. He retrieved it discreetly, unfolding it to reveal a single word scrawled in hasty ink. Betrayal. His pulse quickened. Was this a continuation of the game, or a warning of what was to come? As he ascended the stairs to his room, the storm's howl seemed to echo the unease in his heart. Blackreef Island was a powder keg, and the game of secrets had lit a fuse. Poirot knew that the next move would not be a game. It would be murder. Chapter 4. The body in the library. The storm raged on, its fury rattling the windows of Hawthorne Manor as if the island itself were protesting the secrets it harbored. Hercule Poirot had retired to his room after the unsettling dinner, where the guests' confessions had woven a tapestry of motives as intricate as any he had encountered. The word betrayal, scrawled on the scrap of paper he had found, burned in his mind. He sat at the writing desk, the locket with the initials E.H. and the ledger's cryptic entries before him, when a piercing scream shattered the silence of the night. Poirot was on his feet in an instant, his walking stick in hand, his senses sharpened by the urgency of the cry. It had come from the lower floor, near the library. He moved swiftly through the darkened corridors, his polished shoes silent on the carpet, guided by the flickering light of gas lamps and the distant sound of voices. As he descended the grand staircase, he saw Miss Clara Beaumont in the hallway, her face pale, her hands trembling as she clutched her shawl. "John, Monsieur Poirot," she gasped, her voice quivering. It septs, Lord Hawthorne. In the library. He septs, dead." Poirot's eyes narrowed, his little grey cells already at work. "Calm yourself, mademoiselle," he said firmly. "Show me." Clara led him to the library, where the heavy oak door stood ajar. The other guests were gathering, drawn by the commotion. Lady Eleanor Vance, her expression unreadable. Dr. Julian Carver, his spectacles fogged with nervous sweat. Captain Roger Maitland, his face grim, and Mr. Vincent Lyle, his eyes gleaming with a curiosity that bordered on eagerness. The library was a cavern of shadows, its shelves lined with leather-bound tomes that seemed to absorb the candlelight. Lord Reginald Hawthorne lay sprawled across the Persian rug, his silver hair stark against the crimson stain spreading from his chest. A dagger, its handle, ornate with filigree, protruded from his heart. His eyes, wide open, stared at the ceiling, frozen in a final moment of shock or realization. Poirot knelt beside the body, his gloved fingers hovering over the scene, careful not to disturb it. "Mon Dieu," he murmured, his voice steady, despite the gravity of the moment. A murder most deliberate. He examined the dagger, noting its antique design and the absence of blood on the handle, suggesting the killer had worn gloves or wiped it clean. The wound was precise, a single thrust, indicating strength and intent. The library's windows were locked, the curtains undisturbed, and the door showed no signs of forced entry. A locked-room mystery, then Poirot's favorite kind. He rose, turning to the guests clustered in the doorway. "No one is to enter this room," he commanded, his tone brooking no argument. "Dr. Carver, as a medical man, can you confirm the time of death?" Carver stepped forward hesitantly, his hands clear as throat. "I set an estimate perhaps an hour ago, maybe two. The body is still warm." His voice shook as he knelt beside Hawthorne, checking for a pulse. "No rigor mortis yet." Poirot nodded, his mind already cataloguing details. "And the door, was it locked?" The butler, who had appeared silently behind the guests, spoke up. "It was locked, monsieur. I unlocked it myself when Miss Beaumont called for help." Poirot, Sipter's eyes narrowed. A locked door, a single entry point, and yet the killer had escaped. He turned to Clara. "Mademoiselle, you found him. Tell me exactly what happened." Clara's eyes were wide, her voice trembling. "I couldn't sleep. The storm, it was so loud. I came to the library to find a book, something to calm my nerves. I saw the door ajar, and there he was." She covered her face, sobbing softly. Poirot studied her, noting the genuine distress, but also the theatricality of her gestures. He turned to the others. "Where were you all at the time of the scream?" Lady Vance spoke first, her voice icy. "In my room, reading. I came when I heard Miss Beaumont." Dr. Carver nodded, claiming he was in his room writing a letter. Captain Maitland said he was smoking a cigar in the billiard room, and Mr. Lyle admitted to wandering the corridors, unable to sleep. Poirot noted their alibis, each one conveniently solitary, unverifiable in the chaos of the storm. He dismissed the guests, instructing the butler to guard the door, and began a meticulous examination of the room. The library was vast, with high ceilings and a fireplace still smouldering with dying embers. A glass of brandy sat on a side table near Hawthorne's body, half empty, suggesting he had been drinking before his death. Poirot's eyes caught a faint scuff mark on the rug near the desk, as if something heavy had been dragged. He followed the mark to a bookshelf, where a single volume, A History of the Island, jutted out slightly. Behind it, he found a hidden panel, barely perceptible, that opened to a narrow passageway. A secret exit, perhaps. He closed it carefully, deciding to investigate later. A glint of metal under a chair caught his eye. He retrieved a small cufflink, engraved with the letter M's, Maitland perhaps, or a deliberate misdirection. Poirot pocketed it, his mind racing. The dagger, the locked door, the cufflink, the hidden passage, all pieces of a puzzle that refused to fit together neatly. As he emerged from the library, the guests were gathered in the drawing-room, their faces a mixture of shock and suspicion. Lady Vance stood by the window, staring into the storm. "Who could have done this?" she murmured, her voice barely audible. "Someone in this house," Poirot replied, his tone measured, "and I shall find them." His eyes swept over the group, noting the way Lyle's fingers twitched, the way Carver avoided his gaze, the way Mowland's hand rested near his pocket, as if checking for something missing. The storm howled outside, a fitting accompaniment to the chaos within. Poirot addressed the group. "Until the authorities arrive, I must ask you to remain calm and stay within the manor. The killer is likely among us, and I will not permit them to escape." Mr. Lyle smirked. "You think one of us did it, Poirot?" "That sips quite an accusation." "It is not an accusation," Poirot said calmly. "It is a fact. The island is cut off, the staff accounted for, and the method suggests intimacy, a personal motive." His words silenced the room, and he felt the weight of their stares. The game of secrets had taken a deadly turn, and Poirot knew the next move would be his. As the guests dispersed, Poirot lingered, his eyes on the storm outside. The cufflink, the passage, the word betrayal, each clue was a thread in a tapestry of deceit. He would weave them together, but first he needed to know more about Lord Hawthorne's past. The library held the key, he was certain, and he would return at first light to uncover its secrets. Chapter 5. Whispers of the Past. The storm's relentless assault on Blackreef Island showed no sign of abating, its howls weaving through the corridors of Hawthorne Manor like the cries of restless ghosts. Hercule Poirot stood in the library, the scene of Lord Reginald Hawthorne's murder, his grey eyes scanning the room with meticulous precision. The body had been moved to a cold storage room at his insistence, preserving it for the authorities once the storm allowed their arrival. The dagger, the cufflink engraved with an M, and the hidden passage behind the bookshelf were pieces of a puzzle that refused to align, but Poirot was undeterred. His little grey cells thrived on such challenges, and he sensed that the key to the murder lay in Hawthorne's past, a past he intended to unearth. The morning light, dim and grey through the storm-lashed windows, cast eerie shadows across the library's shelves. Poirot began his investigation anew, his gloved fingers tracing the edges of the desk where Hawthorne had fallen. The brandy glass, now empty, had been sent to the kitchen for analysis, though Poirot suspected no poison. Hawthorne's death was too visceral, too personal. The cufflink tucked safely in his pocket suggested a connection to Captain Maitland, but Poirot was wary of such obvious clues. A killer cunning enough to strike in a locked room would not be so careless. He turned his attention to the hidden passage he had discovered the previous night. The panel behind the bookshelf opened with a faint click, revealing a narrow, cobweb-draped corridor. Poirot lit a small lantern, its glow illuminating damp stone walls that smelled of earth and neglect. The passage led to a back staircase, which emerged near the servants' quarters, a discreet exit, perhaps used by the killer to escape unnoticed. But why leave the door ajar, as Clara Beaumont had claimed? Poirot filed the question away, returning to the library to continue his search. His eyes fell on a row of books, their spines worn but meticulously arranged. One volume, a leather-bound journal, was slightly askew as if recently handled. Poirot pulled it from the shelf, its pages yellowed with age. The journal bore no name, but the handwriting matched the elegant script of Hawthorne's invitation. It detailed business dealings from 2 decades ago, investments in shipping, real estate, and a mysterious venture referred to only as the Black Reef Trust. One entry, dated 1915, read, E.H. betrayed, price paid in full. Silence ensured. The initials E.H. again, matching the locket Poirot had found on the shore. A coincidence? None. Poirot did not believe in such things. He tucked the journal under his arm, intending to study it further, and turned his attention to the guests. Their alibis, given in the chaos of the murder's discovery, were flimsy at best, and their confessions during Hawthorne's game of secrets had revealed motives aplenty. Poirot decided to begin with interviews, starting with Lady Eleanor Vance, whose guarded demeanour intrigued him most. In the drawing-room, Lady Vance sat by the fireplace, her black silk dress absorbing the light. Her face was composed, but her fingers twisted a lace handkerchief with subtle agitation. "Monsieur Poirot," she said, coolly as he entered, "I trust you have made progress." "Progress, madame, is a matter of method," Poirot replied, taking a seat opposite her. "Tell me, what was your relationship with Lord Hawthorne?" Her eyes flickered, but her voice remained steady. "We were acquaintances, nothing more." Reginald was a complicated man. His business dealings often left others wanting. She paused, as if choosing her words. He had enemies, as wealthy men often do. Poirot noted the careful phrasing, and the initials said, "Stud, do they mean anything to you?" Her fingers stilled, and for a moment her composure wavered. "My late husband was Edward Hawthorne, Reginald's cousin, but that was long ago." She met Poirot's gaze, daring him to press further. He did not, instead filing her reaction away. Next he sought Dr. Julian Carver, finding him in the billiard-room, staring blankly at the table. Carver's nervous tic was more pronounced, his spectacles slipping as he answered Poirot's questions. "I barely knew Hawthorne," he insisted. "I was invited as a favor to a colleague. I have no reason to wish him harm." Yet his trembling hands suggested otherwise, and Poirot recalled his confession about falsifying records, a potential link to Hawthorne's shady dealings. Miss Clara Beaumont was in the conservatory, surrounded by wilting orchids, her golden curls disheveled. "I didn't know him well," she said tearfully. "He promised to invest in my next play, that's all." Her distress seemed genuine, but Poirot noted her quick glance toward the door, as if expecting an interruption. "Captain Maitland, found polishing his boots in his room, was brusque. Hawthorne was a profiteer, he growled. I came because he owed me debts from the war, but I didn't kill him. His hand strayed to his pocket, and Poirot wondered if he was checking for the missing cufflink. Mr. Vincent Lyle, lounging in the smoking room, was the most forthcoming, or so he appeared. Hawthorne played dirty in business, he said with a smirk. I respected that, but murder, not my style. His eyes, however, held a calculating glint that Poirot distrusted. Each interview added a thread to the tapestry of suspicion, but none provided clarity. Poirot returned to his room to study the journal, its pages revealing a scandal involving the Blackreef Trust, a scheme that had bankrupted several investors, including an E.H. The entry from 1915 hinted at a betrayal perhaps tied to Lady Vance's late husband. Was she seeking revenge, or was another guest hiding a connection to this past? As evening fell, the storm grew fiercer, the manor creaking under its onslaught. Poirot joined the guests for a tense dinner, where conversation was stilted, and every glance was laden with suspicion. He observed their interactions, noting how Lyle's jests provoked Maitland's scowl, how Carver avoided Clara's gaze, and how Lady Vance's eyes lingered on the empty chair at the head of the table. After dinner, Poirot slipped back to the library, determined to search for more clues. As he examined the desk, a faint noise, a soft thud, came from the hidden passage. He froze, his hand on his walking stick. The panel was closed, but the air felt charged, as if someone had been there moments before. He opened the passage, lantern in hand, but found only shadows. Yet on the floor, near the entrance, lay a single pearl earring, its luster catching the light. A woman's, perhaps Clara's, or Lady Vance's. Or another misdirection. Poirot pocketed the earring, his mind racing. The journal, the locket, the cufflink, the earring. Each clue pointed to a past that refused to stay buried. As he returned to his room, the storm's howl seemed to whisper a warning. The killer was watching, and the next move would be deadly. Chapter 6. The Vanishing Alibi. The storm's unrelenting fury battered Blackreef Island, its winds howling through the night like a chorus of accusations. Hercule Poirot sat in his room at Hawthorne Manor, the journal, locket, cufflink, and pearl earring arranged before him on the writing desk. Each clue was a piece of the puzzle surrounding Lord Reginald Hawthorne's murder, but the picture remained tantalizingly incomplete. The word betrayal from the scrap of paper, the cryptic entries in the journal, and the hidden passage in the library pointed to a killer with intimate knowledge of the manor and its master. Poirot's little grey cells churned, determined to unravel the truth before the storm allowed the culprit to escape. The morning brought no relief from the tempest, the sky a roiling mass of grey that mirrored the tension within the manor. Poirot gathered the guests in the drawing-room, his demeanour calm but commanding. The air was thick with suspicion, the guests' faces drawn from sleeplessness and fear. Lady Eleanor Vance sat rigidly, her eyes avoiding Poirot's. Dr. Julian Carver's nervous tic had worsened, his fingers twitching as he adjusted his spectacles. Miss Clara Beaumont's usual vivacity was subdued, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. Captain Roger Maitland stood by the window, his posture rigid, while Mr. Vincent Lyle lounged with a smirk that grated on Poirot's nerves. "Monsieur, mesdames," Poirot began, his voice precise, "we are faced with a crime most heinous. Lord Hawthorne was murdered in a locked room, yet the killer walked among us. I must reconstruct the events of that night. Each of you will account for your movements between 10 and midnight, when the murder occurred." The guests exchanged uneasy glances, but Poirot's gaze was unrelenting. He began with Clara, who had discovered the body. "Mademoiselle Beaumont, you said you went to the library for a book. At what time?" Clara's eyes flickered. "Around 11, I think. I couldn't sleep, so I wandered downstairs." Her voice trembled, but Poirot noted a slight hesitation, as if she were measuring her words. "And you saw no one else?" he pressed. She shook her head. "No one." The door was ajar, and there he was. Poirot turned to Lady Vance. "Madam, you were in your room reading?" "Yes," she replied. Her tone clipped. I heard the scream and came at once. Her composure was impeccable, but Poirot detected a faint flush in her cheeks. Dr. Carver claimed he was writing a letter. Captain Maitland reiterated his cigar in the billiard room, and Mr. Lyle maintained he was wandering the corridors. Poirot listened, his mind mapping their timelines against the murder's window. The butler, who had been questioned earlier, confirmed that the staff were in their quarters, preparing for bed, and had seen nothing unusual. Yet one alibi troubled Poirot, Captain Maitland's. "Monsieur Maitland," Poirot said, his eyes locking onto the captain's septs-weathered face, "you were in the billiard room, smoking a cigar. Did you leave at any point?" Maitland, jaw tightened. "No, I was there until I heard Miss Beaumont Sitz scream." Poirot's Sitz moustache twitched. "Curious, then, that the billiard-room Sept's ashtray contained no cigar ash when I examined it this morning, and the cufflink marked with an A M Sept found near the body. Might it be yours?" The room fell silent, the storm Sept's roar filling the void. Maitland Sept's hand moved to his sleeve, a reflexive gesture that did not escape Poirot. "I lost a cufflink. Days ago," he said gruffly. "Anyone could have taken it." Poirot nodded, his expression unreadable. "We shall see." He dismissed the guests, but his suspicions lingered on Maitland. The absence of cigar ash suggested the captain had not been where he claimed, and the cufflink, whether his or planted, was a damning clue. Determined to find more evidence, Poirot returned to the library, where the murder scene remained undisturbed under his orders. The hidden passage had yielded no further clues, but he examined the room anew, his eyes catching a faint irregularity near the fireplace. A loose brick, barely noticeable, concealed a small cavity. Inside was a blood-stained glove, its fine leather marked with a monogram. V.L. Vincent Lyle. Poirot's pulse quickened. The glove was too small for a man's hand, suggesting it belonged to a woman or was another attempt to mislead. He pocketed the glove, his mind racing. The cufflink pointed to Maitland, the glove to Lyle, yet both could be diversions. The killer was cunning, orchestrating a web of misdirection. Poirot needed to test his theory, and he decided to confront Lyle discreetly. He found Lyle in the smoking room, sipping brandy with an air of nonchalance. "Monsieur Lyle," Poirot said, entering without preamble, "a glove was found in the library marked with your initials. Can you explain this?" Lyle's smirk faltered, but he recovered quickly. "A glove? I don't wear them. Someone's playing games, Poirot." His tone was casual, but his eyes betrayed a flicker of unease. Poirot studied him, noting the calculated bravado. "Games, monsieur, can be deadly. If you are innocent, you have nothing to fear." He left Lyle to stew, aware that the confrontation would provoke a reaction, perhaps a mistake. As the day wore on, the guests' nerves frayed under the storm's relentless pressure. Poirot observed them at luncheon, where conversation was strained. Poirot whispered to Carver, her hand brushing his, a gesture that seemed more than friendly. Lady Vance avoided Maitland's gaze, while Maitland's eyes followed Lyle with barely concealed hostility. Poirot's suspicions of a conspiracy grew. Were two or more guests working together? That afternoon he revisited the journal, focusing on the Blackreef Trust entries. One note mentioned a meeting in 1915 with E.H., R.M., and V.L. initials matching Edward Hawthorne, Roger Maitland, and Vincent Lyle. Had Maitland and Lyle been involved in the same scandal as Lady Vance's husband? The journal hinted at a betrayal that cost lives and fortunes, a motive strong enough for murder. As evening approached, Poirot gathered the guests again, this time in the conservatory, its glass walls trembling under the storm's assault. "The killer," he announced, "has left clues to taunt us. A cufflink, a glove, a hidden passage. But I am Hercule Poirot, and I will not be deceived. If you know anything, speak now." The room was silent, but Poirot's eyes caught a fleeting glance between Clara and Carver. Before he could press further, a crash of thunder shook the manor and the lights flickered out. In the darkness, a gasp and a thud echoed from the far side of the room. When the lights returned, a vase lay shattered on the floor, and Clara clutched her arm. a thin trickle of blood staining her sleeve. "Someone pushed me," she cried, her eyes wide with fear. Poirot's gaze swept the group, his mind alight. The killer was growing bold, and the vanishing alibi was only the beginning. The storm might trap them, but Poirot would ensure the truth did not escape. Chapter 7. Secrets in the Attic. The storm's ceaseless roar enveloped Blackreef Island, its winds rattling the windows of Hawthorne Manor like the frantic knocking of a trapped soul. Hercule Poirot stood in the conservatory, his sharp eyes scanning the shaken guests after the sudden incident with Miss Clara Beaumont. Her claim that someone had pushed her, causing a vase to shatter and her arm to bleed, had sent a ripple of fear through the group. The blood-stained glove, the cufflink marked, the hidden passage, and the journal's cryptic entries about the Blackreef Trust swirled in Poirot's mind. His little grey cells were alight, sensing that the killer was growing reckless or desperate. Clara, her arm bandaged by Dr. Julian Carver, sat trembling, her golden curls clinging to her pale forehead. Lady Eleanor Vance stood apart, her expression unreadable, while Captain Roger Maitland's rigid posture betrayed his unease. Vincent Lyle's smirk had vanished, replaced by a wary alertness. Poirot noted the fleeting glance between Clara and Carver, the tension in Maitland's clenched fists, and Lyle's calculating stare. The incident was no accident, he was certain, but a warning or a distraction. Determined to uncover more about the Blackreef Trust and its connection to the murder of Lord Reginald Hawthorne, Poirot decided to explore the manor's attic, where forgotten relics might shed light on the past. He excused himself, citing a need to reflect, and ascended the narrow staircase to the upper floors, his walking stick tapping softly. The attic door, heavy with dust and cobwebs, creaked as he pushed it open, revealing a cavernous space filled with trunks, crates, and draped furniture, all bathed in the dim light filtering through a single grimy window. The air was thick with the scent of mildew and old paper. Poirot lit a lantern, its glow casting long shadows across the cluttered room. He moved methodically, opening trunks to find moth-eaten clothes, faded tapestries, and a collection of old photographs. One image caught his eye, a group of young men and women dressed in the fashion of the early 1900s, standing on the island's shore. Among them, he recognized a younger Reginald Hawthorne, his arm around a man who bore a striking resemblance to Captain Maitland. A woman, her face familiar, stood beside them, her features matching the photograph in the locket marked E.H. Poirot's pulse quickened. Was this Edward Hawthorne, Lady Vance's late husband, or another figure from the past? A bundle of letters, tied with faded ribbon, lay in the same trunk. The correspondence, dated 1914-1915, was between Reginald Hawthorne and an E.H. discussing the Blackreef Trust, a venture that promised wealth but ended in ruin for many investors. One letter, written in a trembling hand, read, "You betrayed us all, Reginald. The price will be paid in time." The signature was smudged, but the initials E.H. were clear. Poirot tucked the letters and photograph into his coat, sensing they held the key to the motive behind Hawthorne's murder. As he turned to leave, a faint noise, a shuffle, like fabric against wood, came from the far corner of the attic. Poirot froze, his hand tightening on his walking stick. "Who is there?" he called, his voice steady but commanding. No answer came, but the air felt charged, as if the attic itself were holding its breath. He moved toward the sound, lantern raised, and found a trapdoor in the floor, partially concealed by a rug. It led to a narrow ladder, descending to an unknown part of the manor. Another secret passage, perhaps. Before he could investigate, a scream echoed from below, sharp and piercing, cutting through the storm's din. Poirot hurried downstairs, the photograph and letters secure in his pocket. The scream had come from the drawing-room, where the guests were gathered. As he entered, he saw Dr. Julian Carver slumped in an armchair, his throat encircled by a silk scarf, his face frozen in a grimace of terror. He was dead, strangled by the look of it. Clara Beaumont stood nearby, her hands over her mouth, while Lady Vance clutched the arm of a sofa, her composure shattered. Captain Maitland stared at the body, his face ashen, and Mr. Lyle's eyes darted around the room, as if searching for an escape. Mon Dieu, Poirot murmured, kneeling beside Carver. The scarf, a delicate blue silk, was knotted tightly, and a faint scent of perfume clung to it, a woman's, perhaps Clara's or Lady Vance's. Carver's spectacles lay broken on the floor, and a crumpled note was clutched in his hand. Poirot pried it free, unfolding it to reveal a single sentence. The past cannot be buried. The handwriting matched the journals, confirming Poirot's suspicion that the murders were tied to the Blackreef Trust. He rose, addressing the group with calm authority. This is no random act. The killer is among us, and their motive lies in a betrayal from long ago. I urge you to speak now before another life is lost. Clara sobbed. I didn't do it. I was in the hall when I heard him gasp. Lady Vance's voice was icy. This is madness. We're being hunted. Maitland's fists clenched, and he muttered, Carver knew something too much. Lyle's smirk returned, but it was strained. You're grasping, Poirot. You've got nothing. Poirot's eyes narrowed. On the contrary, monsieur, I have everything I need save the final piece. He held up the note, watching their reactions. Clara's tears seemed genuine, but her quick glance at Maitland was telling. Lady Vance's fingers tightened on her handkerchief, and Lyle's smirk faltered. Maitland's gaze dropped to the floor, where the broken spectacles lay. Poirot dismissed the guests, instructing the butler to guard Carver's body. Alone in the drawing-room, he examined the scene. The scarf's perfume was faint but distinctive, matching a scent he had noticed on Clara during dinner, yet the note's handwriting linked it to the journal. Suggesting a deeper conspiracy, was Clara involved, or was she being framed? And what of Maitland, whose alibi had crumbled, and Lyle, whose initials matched the blood-stained glove? As he returned to his room, the storm's howl seemed to echo the whispers of the past. The photograph, the letters, the scarf, the note, all pointed to a tragedy rooted in 1915, a betrayal that had festered for decades. Poirot knew the attic held more secrets, and the trapdoor beckoned. But first, he would confront the guests again, using the new clues to provoke the killer into a mistake. The game was far from over, and Hercule Poirot was determined to play it to the end. Chapter 8. The Lighthouse Riddle. The storm's ferocity showed no sign of relenting, its winds howling across Blackreef Island like a dirge for the 2 lives lost within Hawthorne Manor. Hercule Poirot stood in the drawing-room, his sharp eyes lingering on the spot where Dr. Julian Carver had been found strangled, the silk scarf still vivid in his memory, the photograph and letters from the attic, the blood-stained glove, the cufflink marked Merce, the pearl earring, and the note reading. The past cannot be buried, formed a complex web of clues. Each pointed to a betrayal tied to the Blackreef Trust. But the killer's identity remained elusive. Poirot's little grey cells buzzed with determination, for he sensed the answer lay beyond the manor's walls, on the island itself. The discovery of the trapdoor in the attic had piqued his curiosity, but another lead demanded his attention, the island's abandoned lighthouse, mentioned in passing by the butler as a place of local legend. The journal's reference to a cursed relic buried on Blackreef Island suggested the lighthouse might hold answers. Despite the storm's dangers, Poirot resolved to investigate, for the killer was growing bolder, and time was running short. He donned his overcoat and hat, securing the attic's letters and photograph in a waterproof pouch. The manor was quiet. The remaining guests, Lady Eleanor Vance, Miss Clara Beaumont, Captain Roger Maitland, and Mr. Vincent Lyle, sequestered in their rooms under the butler's watch. Poirot slipped out through a side door, the wind tugging at his coat as he followed a rocky path toward the cliffs. The lighthouse stood at the island's northern tip, a skeletal silhouette against the roiling sky, its beacon long extinguished. The path was treacherous, slick with rain and strewn with loose stones. Poirot gripped his walking stick, his steps deliberate, his eyes scanning the darkness for signs of pursuit. The memory of the shadow on the shore lingered, and he was not foolish enough to believe he was alone. The lighthouse loomed closer, its weathered stone pocked by years of salt and wind. The door, rusted but unlocked, creaked as he pushed it open, revealing a spiral staircase cloaked in shadow. Inside, the air was damp and heavy, the scent of mold mingling with the tang of the sea. Poirot lit his lantern, its glow illuminating cobwebs and cracked walls. The staircase wound upward, each step groaning under his weight. At the top, the lantern room was empty save for a broken lens and a scattering of debris. But it was the wall that drew his attention, a cryptic message carved into the stone, its letters jagged and uneven. The relic guards the truth, but its curse claims all who seek it. Poirot's moustache twitched. A relic, cursed or otherwise, tied to the island's history and perhaps to the murders. He examined the carving, noting its fresh edges, suggesting it was recent, perhaps etched by the killer or a conspirator. Below the message, a faint symbol, a crescent moon encircled by thorns, was scratched into the stone. It matched an emblem in the journal, linked to the Black Reef Trust. Was this relic the key to the betrayal that had cost Lord Hawthorne and Dr. Carver their lives? He searched the room, his gloved fingers probing for hidden compartments. In a rusted tin box beneath a pile of debris, he found a tattered map of the island, its edges frayed but legible. It marked a cave near the cliffs, labeled Relic's Rest. A clue, perhaps, to the artifact's location. Poirot folded the map carefully, his mind racing. The lighthouse, the message, the map, all pointed to a secret buried in the island's past, one the killer was desperate to protect or exploit. As he descended the staircase, a faint noise, a scrape of stone, echoed from below. Poirot extinguished his lantern, plunging into darkness, and pressed himself against the wall. Footsteps, soft but deliberate, approached the lighthouse door. He waited, his breath steady, until the sound retreated. Peering out, he saw a figure vanish into the storm, cloaked in a dark coat, the same shadow from the shore. He could not be certain, but the encounter confirmed his suspicion. The killer was watching his every move. Returning to the manor, Poirot found the guests gathered in the dining hall, their faces pale under the flickering candlelight. The butler had reported Carver's murder to the group, and fear hung heavy in the air. Clara's eyes were red from crying, her bandaged arm a stark reminder of the earlier incident. Lady Vance sat with icy composure, her fingers tracing the edge of a teacup. Maitland's gaze was fixed on the storm outside, while Lyle's smirk had returned, though it lacked its usual confidence. "Monsieur Poirot," Lady Vance said, her voice sharp, "have you found the monster responsible for this?" Poirot raised a hand, his tone calm but authoritative. "The monster, madame, is human, and their motive lies in a past they cannot escape. I have discovered evidence of a relic tied to the Black Reef Trust that may explain these crimes. Does anyone know of such an artifact?" The room fell silent, but Poirot's eyes caught subtle reactions. Clara's quick glance at Maitland, Lyle's fingers tightening on his glass, Maitland's jaw clenching. Lady Vance's expression remained unreadable, but her hand stilled. "A relic?" she said at last. "Reginald was obsessed with island legends, but I know nothing of it." Maitland spoke gruffly. "Old sailors' tales, nothing more," but his eyes betrayed a flicker of recognition, and Poirot noted it. Dinner was a tense affair, the guests barely touching their food. Poirot observed their interactions, his mind piecing together the clues. The crescent moon symbol, the map, the carved message, all pointed to a secret worth killing for. Was the relic a physical object, or a metaphor for knowledge? And why had Carver been targeted? His confession about falsifying records suggested he knew something about the trust, perhaps a secret shared with Hawthorne. As the meal ended, Poirot slipped away to his room, locking the door behind him. He spread the map on the desk, studying the cave marked Relic's Rest. It was near the shore where he had found the locket, suggesting a connection. The letters from the attic mentioned a betrayal in 1915, tied to Edward Hawthorne, Maitland, and Lyle. Had Carver been part of that past, or a witness to it? A soft knock at the door interrupted his thoughts. It was the butler, his face pale. "Monsieur, there's something you should see." In the cellar, a box hidden behind the wine racks. Poirot followed, his senses alert. The cellar was cold and dim, the air heavy with damp stone. Behind a rack of dusty bottles, a small wooden box bore the same crescent moon symbol. Inside was a single item, a tarnished key engraved with the initials E.H. Poirot's pulse quickened. The key, the relic, the murders, all were linked, and the lighthouse had revealed the next step. The storm might trap them, but Hercule Poirot would unlock the truth, one riddle at a time. Chapter 9. Masquerade of Motives. The storm's unrelenting assault on Blackreef Island cast a pall over Hawthorne Manor, its winds howling like a chorus of restless spirits. Hercule Poirot stood in his room, the tarnished key engraved with E.H. resting on the writing desk beside the locket. The photograph, the letters, the blood-stained glove, the cufflink marked, the pearl earring, and the map from the lighthouse. Each clue pointed to a betrayal tied to the Blackreef Trust, a scandal from 1915 that had claimed Lord Reginald Hawthorne and Dr. Julian Carver. The cryptic message in the lighthouse: "The relic guards the truth, but its curse claims all who seek it," echoed in Poirot's mind, urging him to uncover the relic's secret before the killer struck again. With 2 murders and a growing web of deception, the remaining guests, Lady Eleanor Vance, Miss Clara Beaumont, Captain Roger Maitland, and Mr. Vincent Lyle, were on edge. The butler, under Poirot's direction, had suggested a masquerade ball to keep the group occupied and prevent further panic. Poirot saw it as an opportunity to observe their interactions, for a mask could reveal as much as it concealed. He donned a simple black domino mask, his impeccable suit unchanged, and descended to the ballroom, where candlelight flickered against gilded walls. The ballroom was transformed, draped in velvet, and lit by chandeliers that cast a golden glow. The guests, clad in masks and borrowed finery from the manor's attic, moved with forced gaiety to the strains of a gramophone. Clara Beaumont, in a crimson gown and feathered mask, twirled with an exaggerated grace, her laughter brittle. Lady Vance, her face hidden behind a silver mask, stood by a window, her posture rigid. Captain Maitland, his naval bearing unmistakable even in a black cape, lingered near the punch bowl, his eyes watchful. Mr. Lyle, in a gold mask that matched his predatory grin, prowled the room, engaging each guest with calculated charm. Poirot sipped a tisane, his eyes never leaving the group. The masquerade was a stage, and the guests were actors in a drama of their own making. He noted Clara's frequent glances at Maitland, whose hand strayed to his sleeve, checking for another cufflink, perhaps. Lady Vance's fingers clutched a fan, her knuckles white, while Lyle's laughter carried an edge that set Poirot's nerves on alert. The atmosphere was charged, the storm's rumble a grim underscore to the music. As the evening progressed, tensions surfaced. Clara, flushed from dancing, approached Maitland, her voice low but intense. Poirot, standing nearby, caught fragments of their conversation. "You promised me, Roger," she hissed, her mask slipping slightly. "After all I did for you." Maitland's face darkened. "Keep your voice down, Clara. You got what you wanted. His money, his attention. Don't play the victim now." His words were sharp, and Clara's hand flew to her chest, as if struck. Poirot's moustache twitched. A romantic entanglement, perhaps, or a deeper betrayal. The exchange hinted at a connection to Hawthorne, possibly tied to the Blackreef Trust. He edged closer, but the music swelled, drowning out their words. Clara turned away, her crimson gown swirling, and Maitland stalked off, his cape catching on a chair. A small piece of fabric tore free, falling to the floor unnoticed by all but Poirot. He retrieved it discreetly, his gloved fingers examining the black cloth. It matched Maitland's cape, but more intriguingly it bore a faint stain, blood, perhaps, or wine. Poirot tucked it into his pocket, his mind racing. The cufflink, the glove, and now this fabric. Each clue pointed to Maitland, yet the pattern felt too neat, as if orchestrated to mislead. The music paused, and Lady Vance took the opportunity to address the group, her voice cutting through the chatter. "This farce is intolerable," she said, removing her mask. "2 men are dead, and we dance like fools. Monsieur Poirot, what have you found?" Poirot stepped forward, his mask still in place, his voice calm but commanding. "The truth, madame, is like a mask. It conceals, but it also reveals. I have found evidence of a past that binds you all, a betrayal from 1915 tied to the Blackreef Trust. The relic, mentioned in the lighthouse, is the key. Does anyone wish to confess? The room fell silent, the guests' masks unable to hide their unease. Clara's eyes darted to Maitland, who stared at the floor. Lyle's smirk faltered, and he sipped his drink to cover it. Lady Vance's lips tightened, but she said nothing. Poirot noted their reactions, sensing the killer, or killers among them. The gramophone resumed, but the mood was shattered. Poirot moved among the guests, his questions subtle but probing. He asked Clara about her relationship with Hawthorne, noting her evasive reply. He was a patron, nothing more. To Lyle, he mentioned the blood-stained glove, watching his eyes narrow. "Someone's framing me, Poirot," Lyle said, his tone too smooth. Lady Vance claimed ignorance of the trust, but her fingers betrayed her, twisting her fan until it snapped. As the ball neared its end, Poirot slipped away to the library, drawn by a need to cross-reference the torn fabric with the crime scene. The room was as he had left it, the air heavy with the memory of Hawthorne's death. He examined the rug near the desk where the dagger had been found, and noticed a faint snag in the fibers, matching the texture of Maitland's cape. A coincidence or another planted clue. Returning to the ballroom, he found the guests dispersing, their masks discarded like shed skins. Clara lingered, her eyes red, and Poirot approached her. "Mademoiselle, your conversation with Captain Maitland was most illuminating. A promise broken, perhaps." She flinched, her voice barely a whisper. It was nothing, just old wounds. But her trembling hands told another story, and Poirot suspected she knew more about Maitland's connection to the trust. As he retired to his room, the storm's howl seemed to echo the guests' hidden motives. The torn fabric, the lighthouse's message, the key marked EH, all pointed to a conspiracy rooted in 1915. Maitland's alibi had crumbled, Clara's emotions betrayed her, and Lyle's smugness masked fear. Lady Vance, too, was hiding something, her link to Edward Hawthorne undeniable. Poirot locked his door, spreading the clues on his desk. The masquerade had revealed more than the guests intended, a romantic betrayal, a torn piece of fabric, and a killer growing desperate. The relic, whatever it was the heart of the mystery, and Poirot was determined to find it before the storm broke, or another life was lost. Chapter 10. The Tide Turns. The storm's relentless fury battered Blackreef Island, its winds howling through the night like a lament for the lives lost within Hawthorne Manor. Hercule Poirot stood in the drawing-room, his sharp grey eyes surveying the remaining guests. Lady Eleanor Vance, Miss Clara Beaumont, Captain Roger Maitland, and Mr. Vincent Lyle. The weight of two murders, Lord Reginald Hawthorne's stabbing and Dr. Julian Carver's strangulation, hung heavy in the air, compounded by the clues Poirot had amassed: the locket marked E.H., the blood-stained glove, the cufflink with an M, the pearl earring, the torn fabric from Maitland's cape, the lighthouse's cryptic message, and the tarnished key. Each pointed to a betrayal tied to the Blackreef Trust of 1915, but the killer's identity remained shrouded in deception. Poirot's little grey cells burned with purpose, for he knew the time had come to tighten the net. The guests were gathered at his request, their faces pale under the flickering candlelight. The masquerade ball had exposed a rift between Clara and Maitland, hinting at a romantic betrayal, and the torn fabric had strengthened suspicions against the captain. Yet Poirot suspected a deeper conspiracy, one that might involve more than one culprit. He had decided to present his findings, not to solve the case outright, but to provoke a reaction that might betray the killer. "Monsieur, mesdames," Poirot began, his voice calm but commanding, "we are trapped on this island, and the killer walks among us. I have uncovered evidence that points to a motive rooted in the Blackreef Trust, a venture that ruined lives in 1915. A locket, a glove, a cufflink, and a key all suggest a betrayal that has festered for decades. I ask you now who among you knows the truth." The room erupted in chaos. Clara's voice rose, shrill with fear. "You're accusing us all, Poirot. I had nothing to do with it. Her eyes darted to Maitland, who stood rigid, his fists clenched. Lady Vance's composure cracked, her voice sharp. "This is absurd. Reginald's enemies were many, but I am not one of them." Lyle's smirk vanished, replaced by a scowl. "You're fishing, Poirot. You've got nothing but trinkets and guesses." Maitland's voice cut through the din, low and dangerous. "Enough games. If you've got proof, Poirot, show it. Or are you just stirring the pot?" His hand moved to his pocket, a gesture Poirot noted with suspicion. Poirot held up the torn fabric from the masquerade. "This, monsieur, was found near the library, matching your cape, and the cufflink, marked with a nem yours, perhaps." Maitland's face darkened, but before he could respond, Clara gasped, pointing at Lyle. "What about him?" "That glove you found. It had his initials." Lyle Sept's eyes narrowed. "Careful, Clara." You Sept quick to point fingers. "What about your little spat with Maitland last night?" Sounded personal. Clara flushed, and Maitland took a step toward Lyle, his voice a growl. "Watch your mouth, Lyle. Eusep's been too smug from the start." The argument escalated, voices overlapping in a cacophony of accusations. Poirot watched, his eyes catching every glance, every gesture. Then, in a flash of movement, Lyle lunged for the door, shoving past Clara. "I'm done with this," he shouted, sprinting into the storm-lashed corridor. Poirot's instincts kicked in. "After him," he called, pursuing Lyle with surprising agility for a man of his stature. Maitland and Clara followed, while Lady Vance remained frozen, her eyes wide. The manor's halls echoed with the sound of pounding feet as Lyle fled toward the side entrance, the storm's roar growing louder as he threw open the door. The chase led into the night, the rain stinging Poirot's face as he followed Lyle along the cliffside path. The wind tore at his coat, and the sea below churned violently, its waves crashing against the rocks. Lyle was fast, his figure a dark blur against the storm, but Poirot's determination was relentless. Maitland's heavy footsteps thundered behind, and Clara's cries were lost in the gale. Lyle veered toward the cliffs, his path leading toward the cave marked on the lighthouse map, Relic's Rest. Poirot's pulse quickened. Was Lyle seeking the relic or trying to destroy evidence? The chase reached a precipice where the path narrowed, flanked by a sheer drop to the sea. Lyle stumbled, his coat catching on a jagged rock. A small object fell from his pocket, glinting in the faint moonlight, a silver cigarette case engraved with the crescent moon symbol from the lighthouse. Poirot lunged forward, seizing the case before it could tumble into the sea. Lyle spun, his face contorted with rage. "You don't understand, Poirot," he shouted, his voice barely audible over the storm. "It's bigger than you know." Before Poirot could respond, Maitland tackled Lyle, pinning him to the ground. Clara screamed, clutching Poirot's arm as the wind threatened to push them all toward the edge. "Enough," Poirot commanded, his voice cutting through the chaos. He held up the cigarette case, its emblem gleaming. "This, monsieur, links you to the Blackreef Trust. Explain yourself, or I shall assume the worst." Lyle struggled under Maitland's grip, his eyes wild. "It's not what you think. I was protecting her." His gaze flicked to Clara, who gasped, her face pale. Poirot's mind raced. Her, Clara, or Lady Vance. The betrayal hinted at in the attic's letters, the romantic tension at the masquerade. Was Lyle shielding a conspirator or playing a deeper game? Before Lyle could elaborate, a crack of lightning illuminated the cliff, and a loose rock gave way beneath Maitland. He stumbled, releasing Lyle, who scrambled to his feet and bolted toward the cave. Poirot hesitated, torn between pursuing Lyle and securing the cigarette case. Clara's cry broke his indecision. "He's getting away," she shouted, pointing after Lyle. Poirot clutched the case, its weight a promise of answers. "Return to the manor," he ordered Clara and Maitland. "I will handle this." But as he turned to follow Lyle, a wave crashed against the cliff, sending spray over the path. The cigarette case slipped from his hand, teetering on the edge of the precipice. Poirot lunged, his fingers grazing the metal as it slid toward the sea, the storm's roar drowning out his cry. The case hung on the cliff's edge, a single gust away from oblivion. Poirot's heart pounded, for he knew it held the key to the relic, and perhaps the killer's identity. The tide was turning, but would it sweep the truth away before he could grasp it? Chapter 11. The Hidden Room. The storm's wrath battered Blackreef Island, its winds howling as if mourning the lives lost within Hawthorne Manor. Hercule Poirot stood on the cliff's edge, his gloved fingers clutching the silver cigarette case, engraved with the crescent moon symbol, snatched from the precipice moments before it could plunge into the sea. Vincent Lyle had ended with his escape into the storm, but the case was a vital clue, linking him to the Blackreef Trust and the murders of Lord Reginald Hawthorne and Dr. Julian Carver. Poirot's little grey cells buzzed, piecing together the locket marked E.H., the blood-stained glove, the cufflink with an Ms, the pearl earring, the torn fabric, the lighthouse's cryptic message, and the tarnished key. The tide had turned, but the truth remained just out of reach. Returning to the manor soaked and resolute, Poirot found the remaining guests, Lady Eleanor Vance, Miss Clara Beaumont, and Captain Roger Maitland, gathered in the drawing-room, their faces pale with fear. Lyle's sudden flight had confirmed his guilt in their eyes, but Poirot was not so certain. Lyle's words, "I was protecting her," echoed, suggesting a conspiracy involving Clara or Lady Vance. The cigarette case, now secure in his pocket, was a key to the relic, and Poirot suspected the manor held more secrets. He excused himself, citing the need to dry off, but instead headed to the attic, where the trapdoor he had discovered earlier beckoned. The storm's din masked his footsteps as he climbed the narrow staircase, lantern in hand. The attic was as he had left it, cluttered with trunks and shadows, but the trapdoor in the floor was slightly ajar, as if recently used. Poirot lifted it, revealing a ladder descending into darkness. His pulse quickened, another hidden passage, perhaps leading to the heart of the mystery. The ladder led to a cramped, windowless room, hidden within the manor's walls, its air heavy with dust and secrecy. A single oil lamp illuminated a desk piled with documents, their pages yellowed but legible. Poirot's eyes scanned the papers, his mind racing. They detailed the Blackreef Trust, a financial scheme orchestrated by Reginald Hawthorne in 1915, promising vast returns but collapsing under fraud. Names appeared: Edward Hawthorne, Roger Maitland, Vincent Lyle, and a woman named Eliza Harrow, whose initials matched the locket and key. The documents revealed that Edward, Lady Vance's husband, had been ruined by the scheme, losing his fortune, and soon after his life. A note in Hawthorne's hand read, "Eliza knows. Silence bought at great cost." Poirot's moustache twitched. Eliza Harrow, betrayed by Reginald, was the link between the clues. The locket's photograph, the journal's entries, the lighthouse's message, all pointed to her. Was Lady Vance Eliza, hiding her identity, or was Clara connected to her? The documents suggested a motive for revenge, but the killer's precision implied a deeper plan. As he gathered the papers, a faint creak came from the ladder. Poirot extinguished the lamp, plunging the room into darkness, and pressed himself against the wall. Footsteps descended, slow and deliberate. He held his breath, his walking stick ready, but the figure paused, then retreated. Poirot waited, his senses alert, before relighting the lamp. A single item had been left on the desk, a hairpin, its pearl tip matching the earring he had found. Clara's, perhaps, or another misdirection. He emerged from the hidden room, the documents and hairpin secure, and returned to the drawing-room, where the guests were on edge. Maitland's face was grim, Clara's eyes red from crying, and Lady Vance's composure was fraying. Poirot decided to test them. "I have found a room," he announced, "containing evidence of the Blackreef Trust, a scheme that ruined many, including Edward Hawthorne. The killer seeks to hide this truth. Who among you knows of Eliza Harrow?" Clara gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. "Eliza was my aunt," she admitted, her voice trembling. "She died years ago, heartbroken after the trust collapsed. Reginald promised to help her, but he lied." Her words were laced with bitterness, and Poirot noted Maitland's sharp glance at her. Lady Vance's voice was cold. I knew Eliza. She was reckless. Her ruin was her own doing, but her eyes betrayed a flicker of guilt, and Poirot sensed she was hiding more. Maitland growled, "Enough of this. Lyle's the one you want. He ran, didn't he?" His hand strayed to his sleeve, and Poirot recalled the cufflink. Was Maitland deflecting, or genuinely convinced? Before Poirot could press further, a blood-curdling scream echoed from the upper floors. The group rushed upstairs, following the sound to Lady Vance's room. There, sprawled across the bed, was Mr. Vincent Lyle, his throat slit, a letter-opener clutched in his lifeless hand. Blood pooled on the silk sheets, and a note pinned to his chest read, "The truth cuts deeper." Poirot knelt beside the body, his mind racing. The letter-opener was ornate, matching one from the library, and the wound was fresh, suggesting the murder had occurred moments ago. The note's handwriting matched the journal, and the previous messages confirming a single killer or a meticulous conspirator. Lyle's death so soon after his flight suggested he had known too much or had been betrayed by his accomplice. Clara sobbed, collapsing into Maitland Sept's arms, while Lady Vance stared at the body, her face ashen. "This is madness," she whispered. Maitland Sept's voice was gruff. "He deserved it, the snake. But who Sept's next?" Poirot addressed the group, his tone steady. "The killer is desperate, striking to silence those who know the truth. Eliza Harrow Sept's betrayal is the key, and I am close to unmasking them. Stay together, and trust no one." He examined the room, noting a torn curtain near the window, its fabric matching the black cloth from the masquerade. Another clue pointing to Maitland, or a frame. The storm's howl seemed to mock his efforts, but Poirot was undeterred. The hidden room's documents had narrowed the suspects, Clara with her connection to Eliza, Maitland linked to the trust, and Lady Vance, whose husband's ruin tied her to the motive. As the guests returned to the drawing-room, Poirot lingered, his eyes on the letter-opener. Its handle bore a faint smudge, a fingerprint, perhaps, or a trace of perfume. He pocketed it, determined to compare it to the scarf from Carver's murder. The killer was unraveling, leaving clues in their haste, and Poirot would exploit every mistake. The storm raged on, but the tide was turning. The hidden room had revealed the Blackreef Trust's secrets, and Lyle's death had shifted the game. Poirot knew the killer was among the 3 remaining guests, and he would force their hand before the night was through. Chapter 12. Poirot Sept's Gambit. The storm's unyielding assault on Blackreef Island seemed to mirror the turmoil within Hawthorne Manor, where 3 murders, Lord Reginald Hawthorne, Dr. Julian Carver, and Mr. Vincent Lyle, had cast a pall of dread over the remaining guests. Hercule Poirot stood in the drawing-room, his sharp grey eyes fixed on Lady Eleanor Vance, Miss Clara Beaumont, and Captain Roger Maitland. The clues he had gathered, the locket marked E.A., the blood-stained glove, the cufflink with an M, the pearl earring, the torn fabric, the tarnished key, the silver cigarette case, the hairpin, and the hidden room's documents, formed a tapestry of betrayal rooted in the Blackreef Trust of 1915. Poirot's little grey cells were alight, for he knew the killer was among the 3, and he would use their own fears to unmask them. The air was thick with tension, the storm's howl a constant reminder of their isolation. Poirot had summoned the guests for a final confrontation, his plan a calculated gambit to provoke the killer into a mistake. The drawing-room was lit by flickering candles, their light casting shadows that danced across the guests' pale faces. Clara clutched a handkerchief, her eyes red from crying. Maitland stood rigid, his naval discipline barely containing his unease. Lady Vance sat with icy composure, her hands folded, but Poirot noted the faint tremor in her fingers. "Monsieur, mesdames," Poirot began, his voice steady and commanding, "3 lives have been taken, and the killer is in this room. The Blackreef Trust, a scheme that ruined many, is the heart of this tragedy. Eliza Harrow, betrayed by Reginald Hawthorne, lost everything, her fortune, her family, her life. The clues, the locket, the key, the documents, point to her and to you. Tonight, I will reveal the truth." Clara gasped, her voice trembling. "My Aunt Eliza was a victim. She died because of Reginald's lies. Her eyes darted to Maitland, who shifted uncomfortably. Poirot held up the locket, its photograph glinting in the candlelight. This belonged to Eliza Harrow, found on the shore, and this key marked They E.H. Faro Eloques, a secret tied to the trust. But who among you carries her vengeance? Lady Vance Cest's voice was cold. You accuse us without proof, Poirot. I knew Eliza, but I had no part in this. Maitland growled. You sat, wasting time. Lyle was the culprit. He ran. Didn't dat he? Poirot sipped, mustache twitched. Non, monsieur. Lyle was a pawn, silenced because he knew too much. The cufflink within Fitz points to you, Captain Maitland, as does the torn fabric from your cape. But the glove, marked CVL, sits, and the hairpin suggest another hand, or a clever frame. He turned to Clara. Mademoiselle, your Aunt Sip's betrayal gives you motive, and the pearl earring matches your hairpin, yet your emotions seem genuine. Are you a victim or a player in this game? Clara Sip's eyes widened. I loved my aunt, but I didn't kill anyone. I swear. Poirot paced, his voice rising. The lighthouse Sip's message spoke of a relic, a truth guarded by a curse. The hidden room revealed the trust Sip's fraud, orchestrated by Hawthorne, with Maitland and Lyle involved. But one person here knew Eliza best, one who hid their connection. He stopped before Lady Vance, his eyes piercing. Madame, you are Eliza Harrow. You survived the scandal, assumed a new identity, and married Edward Hawthorne, only to lose him to Reginald Sip's betrayal. The locket, the key, the documents, they all point to you. The room fell silent, the storm Sip's roar filling the void. Lady Vance Sip's composure shattered, her face pale. You cert mad, Poirot. I am Eleanor Vance, not Eliza. Poirot held up the cigarette case, its crescent moon symbol gleaming. This was found on Lyle, who claimed to protect her. He meant you, madame. You orchestrated this, using Lyle to deflect suspicion, planting clues to frame Maitland. But your perfume on the scarf that killed Carver, and the letter opener in Lyle's throat, your touch is unmistakable. Maitland lunged forward, his voice a snarl. She's the killer? Then why frame me? Clara screamed, backing away as Lady Vance rose, her eyes blazing. You know nothing, Poirot, she spat. Reginald destroyed my life, my family. He deserved to die. Her words were a confession, but before Poirot could act, she bolted for the door, her black silk dress trailing like a shadow. Stop her, Poirot shouted, pursuing her into the storm-lashed corridor. Maitland and Clara followed, their footsteps echoing as Lady Vance fled toward the manor's side entrance. The wind tore at Poirot's coat as he chased her into the night, the rain blinding, the cliffs looming ahead. Lady Vance's figure was a blur heading toward the cave, marked Relic's Rest on the lighthouse map. The path was slick, the sea roaring below. Poirot's heart pounded as he closed the distance, his walking stick slipping on the wet stones. Maitland's heavy breaths were behind him, Clara's cries lost in the gale. Lady Vance reached the cave's entrance, disappearing into its darkness. Poirot followed, lantern in hand, its light revealing damp walls and a small altar at the cave's heart. On it lay a wooden box, its lid engraved with the crescent moon symbol. Lady Vance turned, her face wild, a dagger in her hand, the twin of the one that killed Hawthorne. Stay back, Poirot, she hissed. The relic is mine. It proves Reginald Sip's guilt. Poirot Sip's voice was calm, his eyes locked on hers. The relic is a ledger nimistes par, proof of the trust Sest's fraud, hidden to protect your revenge. You killed Hawthorne for his betrayal, Carver for his knowledge, and Lyle for his betrayal of you. She laughed, a bitter sound. You're clever, Poirot, but too late. She lunged, the dagger flashing, but Maitland tackled her, pinning her arms. The box fell, spilling papers across the cave floor, ledgers detailing the trust's fraud, signed by Eliza Harrow. Clara sobbed, clutching Poirot Sip's arm. She used me. She knew my Aunt Sep's story. manipulated me to distract you. Maitland Sept's face was grim. I suspected, but I had no proof. She framed me to cover her tracks. Poirot secured the dagger. His voice steady. The game is over, madame. Your confession seals your fate. He gathered the ledgers, their pages confirming Lady Vance as Eliza Harrow, driven by vengeance to murder. As they bound her hands, the storm's roar seemed to quiet, as if acknowledging the truth. The relic was no curse, but a truth that had cost 3 lives. Poirot's gambit had succeeded, but at a price, and the dawn would bring justice. Chapter 13. The Dawn of Truth. The storm that had gripped Blackreef Island for days began to wane, its wind softening to a mournful sigh as dawn broke over the horizon. Hercule Poirot stood in the drawing-room of Hawthorne Manor, his impeccable suit slightly rumpled from the night's ordeal, but his grey eyes as sharp as ever. The guests, Miss Clara Beaumont and Captain Roger Maitland, sat in tense silence, their faces etched with exhaustion and relief. Lady Eleanor Vance, unmasked as Eliza Harrow and the killer of Lord Reginald Hawthorne, Dr. Julian Carver, and Mr. Vincent Lyle, was bound and seated under the butler's watchful eye. The clues, the locket marked E.H., the blood-stained glove, the cuff-link with an M, the pearl earring, the torn fabric, the tarnished key, the silver cigarette case, the hairpin, and the hidden room's documents, lay spread on the table before Poirot, a testament to his meticulous unraveling of the mystery. His little grey cells had triumphed, but the cost weighed heavily. Poirot addressed the group, his voice calm but resonant. Mes amis, the truth has been revealed, and it is a tale of betrayal and vengeance. Eliza Harrow, known to us as Lady Eleanor Vance, orchestrated these murders to settle a score from 1915, when the Blackreef Trust, led by Reginald Hawthorne, ruined her life and that of her family. Let us reconstruct the events, so there is no doubt. He held up the locket, its photograph gleaming in the morning light. This locket found on the shore belonged to Eliza Harrow, containing her image from happier times. The key marked A.H. Choa unlocked the hidden room where documents detailed the trust's fraud, a scheme that bankrupted Edward Hawthorne, Eliza's husband, driving him to his death. These papers, found in the attic and the hidden room, confirm her motive. Clara's voice trembled. "My Aunt Eliza! She suffered so much. I didn't know she was alive, hiding as Lady Vance." Her eyes were red, but Poirot noted her genuine grief. Poirot continued, lifting the blood-stained glove. The glove marked VL was a clever misdirection, planted to implicate Vincent Lyle. The cufflink with an Mayim and the torn fabric pointed to Captain Maitland, another attempt to divert suspicion. The pearl earring and hairpin, likely Clara's, were used to cast doubt on her. Eliza was cunning, weaving a web of false clues. Maitland's jaw tightened. She framed me because I was part of the trust. I didn't know the full extent of Reginald's fraud until it was too late. His voice held regret, and Poirot believed him. Poirot turned to the cigarette case, its crescent moon symbol catching the light. This, dropped by Lyle during his flight, linked him to the trust. He was protecting Eliza, perhaps out of guilt or manipulation, but she silenced him when he became a liability. The scarf that killed Carver bore her perfume, and the letter opener in Lyle's throat was from the library where she killed Hawthorne. "Lady Vance," Eliza spoke, her voice bitter but resigned. "Reginald destroyed everything I loved. Edward, my children, my future, all gone because of his greed. Carver knew of the fraud and kept silent. Lyle profited from it. They deserved their fate." Her eyes blazed, unrepentant. Poirot's gaze was steady. "Madame, your pain does not justify murder. You used Clara's grief, Maitland's guilt, and Lyle's complicity to orchestrate your revenge, staging a locked-room murder to confound us. The lighthouse's message, the relic guards the truth, referred to the ledger, proof of the trust's crimes hidden in the cave. You sought to destroy it, but I have secured it." He held up the ledger from the cave, its pages detailing the trust sept's fraud. "This is the relic, a truth you could not bury, Your game of secrets played at dinner was designed to sow discord, but it revealed your own motive. Your confession last night sealed your guilt. Clara sobbed. You used me, Eleanor. I told you about my aunt, and you twisted it. Maitland placed a hand on her shoulder, his face grim but protective. Poirot Stowe's voice softened. Mademoiselle, you were a pawn, as was Captain Maitland. The true tragedy is the past, which drove Eliza to this end, but justice will prevail. As he spoke, the distant sound of a steamer's horn cut through the fading storm. The authorities, delayed by the weather, were approaching. Poirot instructed the butler to prepare for their arrival, ensuring Eliza was secured. The guests, shaken but relieved, dispersed to their rooms, leaving Poirot alone with his thoughts. He stepped onto the terrace, the morning air crisp and clean, the sea calming under a pale sky. The island, once a stage for deception, seemed to exhale as the storm retreated. Poirot's mind turned to justice, not merely the law but the moral weight of vengeance. Eliza's pain was real, her losses profound, yet her actions had birthed new tragedies. He thought of the locket, a symbol of lost love, and the ledger, a record of greed. Both were truths, but only one had driven murder. The steamer docked, and uniformed officers entered the manor, their voices brisk as they took Eliza into custody. She walked with her head high, her silver hair catching the light, a figure of defiance to the end. Poirot handed over the evidence, the ledger, the locket, the key, explaining the case with his usual precision. The officers listened, impressed by the little Belgian detective who had solved a triple murder in the heart of a storm. As the steamer prepared to depart, Clara approached Poirot, her eyes still wet. "Thank you, monsieur. I didn't see the truth." Maitland stood beside her, his expression softened. "You saved us, Poirot. I once said forget it." Poirot bowed slightly. "The truth, mademoiselle. Monsieur is my profession, but it is never without cost." He watched them board the steamer, their figures small against the vast sea. Alone on the pier, Poirot adjusted his hat, his moustache immaculate, despite the ordeal. Blackreef Island was a place of beauty and betrayal, a puzzle solved, but not without scars. He boarded the steamer, the ledger in his coat, a reminder that justice, like the tide, was relentless but impartial. As the island receded, Poirot reflected on the human heart, its capacity for love, for vengeance, and for redemption. The dawn of truth had broken, and Hercule Poirot was ready for his next mystery.